is the foundation of everything. That thought is the baseline, and everything is a product of that thought. And not what we've thought for hundreds of years, which is that everything is material and consciousness is, the outgrowth, the final result of this material world. The only thing that could make something like telepathy or clairvoyance or surviving death or precognition possible or communicating beyond, right, the divide is if consciousness is fundamental and every once in a while it gets a body. Yeah, I mean, I think if season 1 was like the warm up to like, okay, in order to explore any of this fully, we have to have a handle to believe it's true, impossible. And I mean, for me, it was understanding that the telepathy is really real. Again, like the science is going to just, I think keep unfolding how real and how vast and how deep this is. That's great. Okay, now with that, where do we go next? And that's what season 2, which drops in 9 days, looks into is like, okay, then what the heck is this place? Like, what does consciousness do? And and so we look at like near death experiences and what we know from people who've quote unquote gone to the other side and come back again and how expansive that is going back thousands of years from like ancient Sumer to Egypt to Native American cultures. And, we look at, mediumship across the divide. And that again involves a non-speaker who can both telepathically communicate with the living and the departed. We look at communication with animals through a non-speaker who has a really deep relationship with horses, a non-speaker who says that she can communicate with plants and understand all of their um, many of their medicinal properties. And what's so wild is she started spelling this stuff pretty early on in her spelling journey, and her family didn't know what astragalus did, some Chinese herb or whatever it was. So how does she know? How does she know? She's not reading. She wasn't being taught anything in school that was about this. So she wasn't really being taught anything in school, yet she knew all these properties of these herbs. So we look at creativity, and like and the many artists who says that like it's magic how often like an idea or a story or a song or an invention or a mathematical equation comes to you fully formed even though you had no training or you don't understand where it came from. And does that level of consciousness when that happens to us, if we're not ready or we're not a good partner, does it move on to someone else? And there's many of examples of that in season 2. And so I think at the end of season 2, I'm hoping if people left season 1 thinking telepathy is real, I'm hoping they leave season 2 feeling like we survive. Our consciousness is more than our body. And not only does it survive our body, but it's a part of something much bigger that's actually really playing with us while we're here and alive and seems to have an agenda and a will of its own. Um, and that's quite remarkable. Um, so I think, yes. And I think so much of this we're still trying to figure out. It's been fun. Like we've been trying to do kind of our own experiments to chase some of these things down that feel so unbelievable, like those kids that can see through their eye, blindfold. And we've now been to like 3 different, places in the world of watching this. And then I just try to put my own through kids through it, thinking, well, if this is completely BS, they're gonna let me know because they don't believe in anything. They won't stand for anything that's not like really cool and actually happening. And they started doing it, and I was like, what the heck? So I've stopped doubting a lot. I mean, I doubt everything, and we're super skeptical as we go through it. But what I'm finding right now is if you really dive into a world and ask the questions and keep pressing and try to bring in the right people to do experiments, like it's pretty mind-boggling how much we've dismissed that I don't think is as dismissible as once believed. That was a long. Sorry, that was a long answer. Mm, yeah, yeah, Yeah. Yeah. It kind of is, though. I think you're right. Because we all have that too, right? Like, if if someone were to go see a medium or a psychic, you know right away if this person's, like, pulling your leg and just saying the most generic things, and nothing's landing, and they don't know, and they're reading you for clues and throwing, but then there's those people. Every once in a while, you meet the people who are like, "No, no, no, no," like, this person knew really intimate, deep facts that no one could have known, that there's no way da 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 that this convers and that's the type of stuff where it's like, yes, there's so much noise. There's a lot of clutter. There's a lot of fraud. There, all that has adorned worlds like this. But that doesn't mean you throw it all out. There's also a lot of bad doctors. There's a lot of bad priests. Like you don't. It doesn't throw out the whole thing. Like you have to go look at the good stuff and really explore that to find your truth. Right. Mm, yeah. 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 Yeah, so there's a long, sordid history with what has become the catch-all term of spelling, which is, pointing to letters to communicate. And spelling to communicate first came around, I believe, in the 90s through something called facilitated communication, which was really created to help cerebral palsy and people who had a very hard time, like knowing where their body was in space. And it would work by putting pressure on someone's wrist, and the person with cerebral palsy could communicate. Um, and then it was quickly discovered, oh wow, this could actually work for people with apraxia too, who often also don't know where their body is in space, don't know where their arm is, don't know where their head is, don't know where their feet are, and that can be really helpful. So when facility communication kind of took off, there were a few bad practitioners. Really, I mean, you really have to train, you really have to know how to do it. And there were some sexual, accusations that came around regarding, I mean, there was actually quite a few consent and other things or accusations around abuse that turned out not to be true, and kind of, I think almost all facilitated communication was like, just okay, it can't be real. So, which it was really actually horribly unfortunate because a lot of people who were using this to communicate and were communicating their own, thoughts were had their own version of communication, their only way of communicating taken away in school. And so it took a lot of people who'd been brought into the kind of the fold of society, like back into the shadows of silence. And it's really devastating. But then a few programs kind of, okay, we're going to start spelling to communicate in a different way where there's no touch involved. So a few things have popped up: rapid prompting movement, spelling to communicate, communication for all, the speller's method, and they all are kind of a version of the same thing, which is do not touch the person. You cannot have any physical content, and that's also, I think that's great for some people, but I have watched how physical contact just a little bit can help a speller just ground and then start spelling really fast when there's touch, and like it can slow down a lot when the not touch isn't there. So again, I think families have to be like, what's most important? You need to get something out quick, do you not? But for the most part, if you're doing it in school, that type of thing, like there's absolutely no touch. Um, at some point along the way, there was this message passing test that people were like, okay, let's make sure these are their own words. Can we pass a message passing test? And what was really interesting is often they'd put a parent or someone in a different room, and the speller would start to spell what the parent was seeing. And a lot of people have gone back and look at these tests are like, that was telepathy, but at the time, like, how would you explain that? You couldn't. So it's like, okay, well, this is a weird thing. We don't know what's happening here. There's some sort of strange thing where they're typing what this person's seeing. And what's really interesting when you go start to talk to communication partners and parents, they'll say, oh, yeah, that absolutely will happen a lot if you don't clear your mind. Or like I know some practitioners who will just say, I repeat something in my head all the time, pumpkin, 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 or start singing a song or start doing something. And often the first words that the non-speaker might once the song starts, it's like, can you stop singing that song over and over, or can you stop saying pumpkin, like they hear it. And so a lot of practitioners have been, or we'll just get to the point where, like, I know I have to completely clear my mind. And so what's been great is one of the neuroscientists who was starting to do some of the telepathy tests and looking into this. I think when she started meeting families and gaining the trust of the families to test them, so they didn't just feel like lab rats, right? But like wanted to be engaged in this. The family said, look, like, our kids have to pass a message passing test. So can you also do a test for that, or like figure out the protocols so we can like show that authorship is real? And I love it because this neuroscientist saw that's what's important to these families. It's not showing the telepathy test. That's no problem. They want to prove that their kids' messages are real. And so she came up with these wonderful protocols